Upstairs, 7 to 4.
Hi. Good afternoon. It's 4:30, Monday, January 9th. This is the Administrative Committee meeting. I'm Catherine Bonzo, the chair, and one of these two gentlemen, John Weber or Art Bettke, is going to be the vice chair. So we need to go ahead and take care of that first.
No, first we've got to do minutes.
Oh, okay. All right. So approval of the administrative meetings from November 14th. I read them. They look fine to me.
Approval of the minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd move we approve the minutes since I was on that committee.
I wasn't here, but they're well-written, so I would approve them as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So then there's approval of the committee minutes of November 14th.
Thank you.
All right, now we can move to the second item, selection of committee chair and vice chair.
Well, I nominate you to be chair.
Yes, that's what I thought that we took care of that at that other
Well,
meeting.
this is the official part.
Oh, the official, okay. So officially I accept. And then who would like to be vice chair?
I don't know. I'll do it if you don't want to do it, or you
Before
can do
John,
it.
I can sit here and be slothful.
Okay.
All right, so it's been accepted that John Weber will be vice chair. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
All right, item
I think
3,
we have
revised
to-
street
We have
tree
to
planting
vote
program.
on that, don't
Yes,
we?
we do. Yes.
Oh, you mean send it to the council to vote?
No, we have to vote on it amongst ourselves.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There you go.
All right. Moving to item 3, revised street planning program. David Schott. And Mike, hi.
Well, good afternoon. Thanks for hearing us with our revised street tree program, tree planting program. This project's really been put together by both the Parks and Recreation Department, thank you, and the Community Development Department. So Mike Ray is here to help with this presentation. Again, this is the revised street tree planting program. I want to start out with a little background of our existing program and then move into some of the revisions with the proposed new program. The city established a tree planting dedication fund through resolution, 3 of them in 1997, 1999, and 2000. This was to facilitate street trees throughout our community. Currently, I receive a final plat from Community Development Department and allocate trees. The developer is required to put in $100 per tree into the tree planting dedication fund. This is to go towards street trees and new developments. The $100 is intended just to supply the tree and not the installation. The current program is, for the most part, with new subdivisions, and the tree planting dedication fund is a voucher-based program. The essence of this program is truly a voluntary type program. These are the results to date. We're looking at 54% utilization. I would note that if we take out the gray boxes, to here, we're at 65%. Rolling Hills, as of this summer, had 5 houses built. That takes us to 61%. But when you account for all the subdivisions in the current tree planting dedication fund program, we're looking at 54%. So, Peekaboo hasn't, they're moving dirt. They haven't built houses yet. So. In 2015, the Street Tree Advisory Committee, who was a developer, a contractor, attorney, tree commission members, planning zoning commission member of the public, and city staff discussed and recommended the idea of revising our current program with the goal to increase street trees planted. I think we all know the benefit of trees. I've got a big paragraph listed. Some of the things for trees for me are the livability aspect, the shade in the summer, stormwater control, all these goods. There's a lot of benefits to trees, just the aesthetics of our community. Now we'll move into some of the major revisions. Street trees shall be required to be installed prior to the issuance of a building permit. The contractor will submit their plans, as they do now, to the Community Development Department for a new principal structure or substantial improvement to any existing principal structure anywhere within the city. This is different from our old program, which is really centered about new subdivisions. This is really about a principal structure in the city of Moscow or substantial improvements, so its scope is much larger. We broke this out into a couple different sections. So for single and two-family dwellings prior to the issuance of the building permit, for single-family or two-family dwellings or a substantial improvement, The applicant they've got 3 choices at this point: install the required street trees, enter into an agreement with the city saying they will prior to the issuance of final certificate of occupancy, or the third option is to provide us financial security in a form acceptable to the city. That's for single-family and two-family. Multifamily and commercial properties are a bit different. They are required to submit a landscape plan to community development. Because of that plan, they'll have to allocate where the trees are. If they want to get a issuance of an early certificate of occupancy, they will have to, the financial security would come into effect as well. So they would provide a financial security to the city. A little bit about the financial security. It'll be established in fee resolution. We didn't put it in the draft resolution or ordinance because this may change from year to year. This would be part of the fee resolution. The Moscow Tree Commission on December 6th considered and recommended a financial security of $250 per tree. This would be for the tree and the installation. This sounded like a good number to start at. I've heard through our tree commission, I reached out to local contractors. Typically, they charge about 1.5 times to 2.5 times the cost of the tree. One contractor was 2.2 to 2.4%. So at 1.5 times, $100 tree, $150 to install for a total of $250. So, just as a side note, the existing tree planting dedication fund, I ran the numbers, and it looked like those trees averaged through the life of the program about $80.15 a piece. So through the life of the program. So. Release of the security. Within 60 days, I'll release that security. The community forestry administrator is my office. The trees can be planted by the property owner, or they could hire a contractor to do that. I'll inspect it, make sure they're planted. Financial security would be released back to that homeowner. This is the teeth in the program that makes this not so much a voluntary program, but really truly makes this a mandatory program. If they don't install the trees within 24 months of the date of certificate of occupancy, the city can go in and pay to have those trees planted. So it's really a mandatory type program. I would note that in the draft ordinance and resolution, we have it in Section 4, shall be effective on passage. We would like to amend that, and we would recommend amending that to July 1 of this year to give us an opportunity to educate our contractors and get word out about the program prior to this being implemented. So just ask for that consideration. Staff recommendation is recommend the adoption of the revised street tree program, the resolution, and approve the amendments to the Moscow City Code, Title 5, Chapter 8. The action would be recommend adoption of the program through resolution and the ordinance adopting the amendments under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings. And then it'd be read by title and published by summary, or consider the ordinance a first reading, or reject the ordinance, or take action deemed as necessary. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments from the committee.
Do you have any questions?
A couple of them. Who gets to choose? Is it the developer who gets to choose between option 1, 2, or 3, whether they want to put them in before building permit is issued, if they want to put them in prior to certificate of occupancy or financial security? Is that the developer's option?
It would be, yeah. So it'd either be it could either be the homeowner, it could be the contractor, it could be the developer. It really just depends on who's the one that is, property it is, and who's constructing the dwelling on that property.
Because it makes sense relative to certificate of occupancy for, if you don't know where your driveway is going to be on a particular plot of land, why plant a tree and then rip it out for the sake of a driveway?
Sure.
So
yeah, usually the contractor comes into the office, he's working on behalf of the property owner, and so usually they're communicating and conveying that. They would let the owner know that this is a responsibility to plant, however many trees per lot, and they probably would discuss the type of tree and, work out those details from there.
how do we handle, the ordinance would handle areas where you don't have tree lawns? like some of the olders, when you undergo a major renovation or a replacement housing, where does the tree go?
Well, I believe the community forestry administrator has some discretion in the current resolution and the proposed draft resolution to provide some flexibility. If there's no room within the tree lawn, they can maybe locate it on the other side of the sidewalk. You know, there's some options there.
Yeah, because I know some of the sidewalks are right up to the street, so so would that be the discretion of the forestry department, essentially?
It would
to
be.
negotiate.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that was on the onset of this whole project with the Street Tree Advisory Subcommittee. There is some discretion with the Community Forestry Administrator that they can waive if it doesn't make sense, that option's still
Or
available.
negotiate options?
Yep, yeah. So they may not have on the frontage of, say, the east side, but maybe the adjacent public right-of-way
Or
around
even
the
as
corner
far
has
as
it.
back into somebody's lawn? If the sidewalk is right up to the street, then on the inside of that possibly?
Both the existing program and the proposed program would be strictly city-owned properties and public right-of-way. So it
So I
couldn't go
think
on
the
private
right-of-way would
property.
still extend back in beyond the sidewalk, where you've got street and sidewalk exactly adjacent.
For older subdivisions,
That's what I'm
typically the
thinking.
case. Newer subdivisions, usually the property lines are back edge of sidewalk, but there's usually an easement, utility easement, 10 feet beyond that. So there are some options there for that.
Yeah, or even areas where there's no sidewalk at all, because there's a lot of that around.
Well, I felt like what you're talking about, I had notes about this. You know, under Section 8, where you've revised 9 and 10, where it says care of trees within the city, some of the stuff that I think you're actually talking about, who does what, is
More like the location.
do you want to have that addressed, though? Because that's not in there.
Yeah, because the city does have the easement, or in the areas, older parts of town where there is no sidewalk, there is no tree lawn, it's just people's lawns right up to the street, and they undergo a substantial renovation or new construction or something. Where do the trees go? Is that addressed anywhere in here?
What about where it says private controller responsibilities B2?
Well, if you look at the resolution, and you look under subsection B, Street Tree Planting Program Guidelines, that first statement there, following shall be required tree planting allotment for each type of lot. Deviation from the standards as described in B1 shall be approved in writing. So the forestry administrator has some the ability to deviate from these set standards about how many trees are in there. But if it's a lot where it's more of an infill development and there's no sidewalk, usually we'd work with community development and the engineering department in order to determine where that sidewalk is going to be. Usually all of our street standards require some tree lawn that would need to be waived by the council if they're not going to put a tree lawn in. So usually if it's an infill lot, they'd be required to install the sidewalks as well per our code. So there'd be an opportunity at that time to put the tree lawn, curb gutter, sidewalk, and put those street trees in at that location.
Just another couple of minor. Is there any way to achieve more street tree planting in existing areas? I'm thinking like along Rodeo Drive between Highway 95 and Polk.
Art, very good question. What do we do with the funds in the existing tree planting dedication fund and the I'll call it old program? We're working on that. I had the forestry intern go through the city and figure out how many trees we had that we could plant after the driveways have gone in, after utilities. I've got names and addresses of people that could have trees. Still a voluntary program. The goal is to some public outreach and say, hey, are you aware that the city will fund $100 per tree for you to plant trees in the public right-of-way? It's ongoing. I kind of had that information going into the fall. Wintertime is not a good idea. I did do a little pilot program with one subdivision, I think Indian Hill 6th, and issued letters in the fall. And I did have somebody already to bite on that owns 2 lots. There would be a total of 9 trees.
Yeah.
So,
Because I'm thinking some people are not real keen on the trees because they like the gravelled tree lawn area, the rolled curbs, and oh, look, it's an extra wide driveway to park vehicles in the side yard, which is not really what we're after at all.
And our Moscow Tree Commission's aware of this, and we're coming up for options. The first step was to try the public outreach. Some of those might be challenging.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's exactly, I had a question about that. Like, when residents move into homes here, do they get any kind of information about the tree planting opportunities that they have through the city when you have new subdivisions go in, or we have, like, a little bit of what you have done there? That's what I wondered. It was kind of dovetailing on what you're saying, pushing some information out there so that they can get a tree if they want a tree.
I've found I've had some luck with some of the subdivisions, not through, say, realtors distributing. I can't really speak to that. I just don't know. But I know word of mouth is going pretty good. Indian Hill 6, I believe. I had one person take advantage of the program this year. Pretty soon all their neighbors were. It was a word of mouth thing, which was good to see. Now, it didn't plant all the trees that were needed out there, but it was good to see. So.
I had a question about, I'm glad you answered that you're the community forester.
Community Forestry Administrator.
Okay, so you're the community, yeah, I was wondering who that was at the thing, so thank you for answering that. And then I was looking at the page that had the information about the cul-de-sacs, and there were two different types of cul-de-sacs. There was a 30-foot cul-de-sac and a 40-foot cul-de-sac. And the reason I'm asking, because I'm trying to educate myself about the streets, and they actually, there was a diagram. There it is. It's 20 of 28 in our packet, but 3D in the packet.
I think he was just providing an example of what our typical street standards would look like and the requirement of trees. Our cul-de-sac design is 96-foot radius.
Well, that's what I thought. So,
Diameter.
okay. So I didn't understand why these were there. Is that 96 diameter?
96-foot diameter is the
30 and
current
40?
standard. It would be 96 total for diameter, so it'd be.
Yeah, these guys are showing 60 and looks to be 80 foot.
Yeah.
Just a frame of reference, it was suggested that I include all the previous resolutions, and
So this was just part of
this
that
is from, I believe, 1997-04.
And so that one's been
And that
deleted.
was just, I believe, an exhibit for that resolution.
Okay.
Because I included the three resolutions just for frame of reference.
Okay, so we updated that. I was wondering why they were included, thank you for that
Because
clarification.
there's some subdivision built to those standards,
Yeah.
and we need to address those.
Okay,
I was just going to
Thanks.
say the same thing. We
Okay.
have existing cul-de-sacs that are not 96 feet. That's our current standard.
Right.
But that standard's only a couple of years old. And so there's a lot of them prior to that are either a 30-foot radius or 40-foot radius, so 60 or 80-foot diameter.
okay, that's good. Thank you for that.
This discussion almost seems like instead of trying to beautify the city as to trees in yards and along streets, and is that we're going to be holding people's feet to the fire. I would like to know that that is not the case. You have to put a tree here, you have to put a tree there. We don't like this idea, we do like that. If that's what we're trying to do, somebody tell me. If that's not what we're trying to do, if we're trying to convince people in town to put trees in, I think you do that by talking to them and saying, we have got a program and we will help you with that. Or if we're just trying to say, hey, you're going to put in a tree right there whether you like it or not. And that appears to be where this discussion is going. And if that is, I can't support it. If we are going to just try to make people aware that we do have a program that will help them beautify their property and the city's property adjacent to their property going to the street, I'm all for it.
Right, and I think that if you read Section 8-9, exactly what you said is what that is.
Pardon me?
The section that they're pushing in, they're asking to add, is exactly what you said. Here's your opportunity to put a tree in. The intent.
Well, the intent is to increase the percentage of trees planted. So, we've had this program for the last 17 years. There's been about a 54% utilization rate. And so, in revisiting the program, we've identified that there's probably some changes that need to be made. That's why Planning and Zoning Commission, the Tree Commission, were working on that. They had pulled together this Citizens Advisory Committee with some contractors and subdivision developers. Right now, you have a program where you're required to submit, or the subdivision developer is required to submit $100 per tree within this subdivision. So they have to pay this, large expense up front through the development agreement, and then it's divvied out as individual homes are built within the subdivision. Well, we've had this 54% utilization rate within that model. And so we had pulled these folks together to figure out, different options as moving forward in order to get more trees planted. There's a little bit of concern from our contractor within the group that not to say that he was required to plant the street trees, but when you end up holding them to the certificate of occupancy, you don't know what banks are going to do in the future, and that was part of his issue. Was usually we have a temporary certificate of occupancy in order to move folks in and clear everything through the banks. Now that's becoming an issue where they want a full certificate of occupancy until they're going to release all the funding. And so he didn't really have an issue with the requirement for planting of the tree, just had an issue with holding up the transaction between the homeowner and himself. So what we'd come up with is provide options for people. That's why we have you can either plant the tree, you can either sign an agreement to plant it prior to the certificate of occupancy, or you can post a financial security, much like we do, a lot of the other public improvements within the city, have them do that, and then, they've got 24 months in order to plant it, and then they get all that money back.
Well, according to what I read here, that $250, well, I have no problem with the $250. I think that's a reasonable amount. But that would be prepaid by the occupant or the applicant, as it says here. Is that correct?
They may not get to that. So they have the option of, say they build the house, everything gets put in. They could just buy a couple trees, plant them out in the tree lawn. You don't have to deal with the $250. $250 only comes into play where maybe they're building a house in the middle of the winter time. There's 5 feet of snow out there in the tree lawn. They can't physically go out there and plant a tree that's going to survive. And so the $250 comes into play where they, say we want the full certificate of occupancy so they can release funding, and we're going to pay the $250 per tree. Once it becomes springtime, they go out and plant the trees. They come to the city, and we totally refund that whole $250. And they're.
And it doesn't make. Then it would go back to the applicant.
Yeah, it would go to the home. It would go to the homeowner. Yeah, so that's the way.
Whoever paid the
or the contractor,
contractor.
however they work it out. So it's just ensuring that the trees get planted. The $250 only comes into play if they can't go out there and plant it, and they want the CO, and they want to defer that for a time. So.
But I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted this to be on the regular agenda, just exactly for kind of the concern that you had, so that all of that. Oh, it's an ordinance too. Okay, so mostly so all that information comes out to be heard. Are there any other questions?
No, I'm good.
All right, so this will be the first ordinance of 2017, won't it?
Might be if the council votes on it.
Yeah. Yes. So I think we'll take it forward then and put it on the regular agenda.
With
Thank
a note to approve, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Our next item is snow removal operation with Tyler Palmer.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Keep your tie in the car.
This is our snow tie.
Yeah.
Well, as you mentioned, this is a report on our snow removal activities thus far in the winter of 2016-2017. It's been an eventful winter thus far, and we just wanted to come and give the council a report. Snow removal is a really critical task that the city engages in. It's an emergency operation that we know we're going to have to engage in every year, and it takes a big commitment of personnel, training, equipment, a big monetary commitment. A lot of planning goes into it, and so we thought we'd give an update on our snow removal activities thus far this winter. One of the first things I want to point out is just that these are the people that make it happen. It's a small group when you think about how big the task is, but a lot of people think about just the streets department when we do snow removal, but the streets department certainly takes the lead, but it's all of Public Works that participates in our snow removal. We have operators that come from water, that come from sewer. We have administrative staff that will even get out and hop in the trucks and go help push snow around when we can remember how to operate a plow. Engineering, helping with the maps. It really is a comprehensive effort. And administration helping us get messaging out. It takes the whole city to make this happen. A lot of cooperation with our police department. And so these are the people that make that all work. We've had an interesting December. Our average, as you can see on this chart, this is the month of December. We had 26.2 inches in the month of December. Our average is 13.1 over the last 115 years. And so that puts us at exactly twice the amount of snow in a December. It's not the most snow we've ever had in a December. You can see that in 71, they got 46.8 inches. But one of the things that has made our snowfall interesting this year is the temperature combined with the snowfall. As we do snow fighting and moving and placing, there are so many variables that we have to consider that can really make it different. 6 inches of snow can look massively different depending on the temperatures before the storm, the origin of the storm, the moisture content, the temperature when it falls, the temperatures that are coming afterward. They all play into how we have to respond to the snow. This year, our average December temperatures, as you can see, it came in at 23.9 degrees was our average December temperature. That places this December in the top 10 coldest Decembers in the last century. And so it's been cold on top of getting a decent amount of snow, which leads to large amounts of accumulation. We don't get melt-offs. When we don't get melt-offs, the snow accumulates. And so that's really what we've been battling with this winter, with quite a bit of success. We talked about it taking a village. This is Tammy Gray, our administrative assistant, out at the shop putting tire chains together. She spent a whole afternoon doing that. She loved getting down there and helping. This is Eric Halverson, who was a streets employee who also happens to have a lot of mechanical acumen, and so as the mechanics were otherwise engaged doing other things, Eric can hop in and help with some hydraulic issues with the truck. One of the things that snow removal is inherently hard on equipment. It's you're moving in cold temperatures that you can't see what's underneath the snow, moving along, pushing heavy loads uphill. It's a dangerous endeavor, and so we've tried to do our best to make sure that it's safe. So from December 1st to January 9th, 3,000 miles they traveled in the snow equipment, and that's with the plow down. That's plowing. That's not getting to and from. That's how many miles were plowed. And when you think about the speed that a snow plow has to go and the things that they have to consider, with 900 miles of those coming with the graders, and that's with graders with snow gates, and they're putting the gate down at driveways and mailboxes and trying to catch bus stops, and so it's a lot of miles to plow in a month. So it's added up this month. We've been very pleased with the response that we've had from our snow removal operators. It takes a lot of planning. It's not something that just happens. We can't just randomly throw guys into trucks and say, "Hey, good luck. Let's go find snow and push it." If we want to have a good response, it has to be an organized response, and that means planning ahead and training our staff adequately. We have the city broken into several different routes. Each driver knows the route that they're responsible for. New drivers are taken on dry runs for their route, and then they ride with an experienced operator the first time they go out on the route so that they can be taught the most efficient way to plow a route. our an efficient snowplow driver can plow a route usually 20 to 30% faster than even an experienced driver who doesn't have experience with that particular area. And so having guys that are familiar with the areas that we're operating in, just those little quirks, those little things, hey, if you turn here instead of here, you end up going downhill instead of uphill here, and you're able to, all those little things, those minutes that we shave off here and there make a huge difference in the long run. And so the organization is imperative. On the back of these maps, there are tips to each area that the guys have worked hard on. We have a very extensive standard operating procedure for snow. Little things like, hey, always plow the snow from on this street to this side of the street because there aren't driveways, or there's manhole that needs to be repaired that they'll make a note of. Lots of little things that you ought to do in an area are on there, as well as contact information, cul-de-sacs, knuckles, dead ends, a lot of the specifics to the route.
Before you go on, what was the difference between the purple and the red?
So the route, this is a route map that's just been marked up. So the guys will go on with markers and mark up. Like, for example, this is a cul-de-sac route where they've marked the cul-de-sacs and knuckles and dead ends that they've been on. So it's the different color that the route driver was using when they were marking out their maps. I mentioned cul-de-sacs, knuckles, and dead ends. It's been a reality of modern development. If you go in the Fort Russell area, you don't see those, and that's because they built on a grid system. These have become far more popular, but they are a heavier maintenance item. On average, we spend about 8 times longer in front of each home in a cul-de-sac, knuckle, or dead end than we do a house on a main drag. And so over the years, that really adds up. It's an added expense for the city to maintain these. And they can be really difficult. It takes very conscientious drivers to do these, because when you think about the way that those are set up, you have driveway, mailbox, and fire hydrant, and there's not a lot of places to put the snow when it starts to stack up. We've got good crews, and they're really working well on this. Berm removal is something that's become imperative in our snow efforts. We've done it for several years now. We introduced a berm removal program 4 years ago. Before, they'd build up, as you all well know, and they were removed periodically once they got really big and they weren't melting off by hiring loaders to go downtown. It was a very expensive process, $10,000 to $15,000, depending on how much snow was out there, and it took several nights. We do berm removal immediately now. We've got the price down to about $1,800 to $2,000 per berm removal, so about a tenth of the cost, and we do it every time it snows. And so that's really worked well. And that was just through creative staff looking for ways to do it, support through administration to get the right equipment to do it, and then just manning the people and making it work out. As you all know, our Berminator, that was the first piece of snow removal equipment we bought. This is Generation 2. Our first one is no more. It died, but this was one that we picked up through a public surplus auction out of southern Idaho, and we've been pretty happy with it, so we keep that running along. We have removed 500,000 cubic feet of snow this year. That's no small amount. If you can imagine what 500,000 cubic feet would look like if it was still in our downtown core, it really has an impact on the perception of our community, on the ability to get around our town. And so that's a big deal. In a winter like this is when you'd really start hearing from people if all that was still downtown. Training is really just the most imperative part. We appreciate the support that we get from admin and council when we put in professional development dollars. We do a lot of in-house training. Every year we have a pre-plow meeting where we sit down, review plowing procedures, talk to the new drivers about what our expectations are. There are a few things that the city does that really form the opinion of our residents about how the whole city operates. And snow removal is one of the most visible. And assumptions are made about the city operation based on the things people can see and interact with. And that's why we really take it seriously, not just for Public Works, but for all of the city, because people make assumptions about how all our departments run based on how we do these very visible tasks. And so we take it very seriously and try and make sure that we have people trained and that we do a job that the community can be proud of. Working together is a big thing. We really look for opportunities to collaborate and cooperate through snow removal. We purchase, the University of Idaho purchases salt through our contract, and the city of Pullman now does as well. We really try and help each other out in these circumstances. We shared our snow removal standard operating procedure with the city of Pullman this year. This is great. Our snow removal site, when you think about how many loads we have to haul for 500,000 cubic feet of snow, it's a lot of round trips. And so we can save a lot of time and do it a lot quicker if we have a good dumping site. And this is a site that we've worked out with the University of Idaho. It's over there off College Street behind Kreitz there. on the south side of College Street. And we've worked out a deal with the University of Idaho where we grade that property twice a year for them to help them keep the weeds down and control the property, and in exchange they allow us to dump snow there in a very central location, so we're able to get rid of the snow. So that's worked out really well and been a good area of cooperation and collaboration. A few things that are upcoming that would be good just to be aware of. We have had some targeted parking restrictions, and we will probably be doing some more targeted parking restrictions. If we don't get some warmer temperatures and diminish the size of some of these berms, we have streets that are narrow, especially with parking even during the summer. And so as we get snow berms and cars get pushed out, they end up getting too narrow. We have some streets, for example, C Street, we've already done this on. We pulled parking, and we were in an area on Blaine Street we did as well, where it gets really narrow by Lena Whitmore. We did some berm removal actually there. And so our plan is to remove parking from some of these critical areas, and then as weather and staffing allows, we'll try and get in and get berms removed so that we can get parking back on them. But it's getting to the point with some of them that you couldn't safely get an emergency vehicle through there, and so we really have to prioritize the emergency response over the parking in those situations. So we're trying to make that as minimally invasive as possible, but it's something that we've got to do in order to make sure that we can get people around and get plows through. So yeah, we'll be doing that additional berm removal. We'll try and get the nice thing about the blowers that we have now is that they are smaller and more agile, and so we can get in. We did some experimentation. What we didn't know was that with the berms that have been sitting for a long time, how they would do with the ice that builds up in those berms. They get pretty dense. But we've been pretty successful with the few that we've tried it on over in the Lena Whitmore Elementary School area. And so as we do have to pull the parking from certain areas, we're going to try and get out and do the berm removal as weather allows, if we can get people out there. And then as always, when we get a lot of snow and very cold temperatures, it makes thick ice and a lot of latent water just waiting to come down the creek. And so preparation for high water events is a big thing. With the rain that we had yesterday, that's always a concern. We have to keep a close eye on that and make sure that we're ready to jump straight from snow response to flood response. And so that's something we have a good operating procedure for. We've really refined that over the last several years. And so hopefully we get a nice gradual thaw as this comes. We don't get a Chinook and half an inch of rain and 45-degree temperatures, but we'll deal with it if it comes. So those are the upcoming things. With that, we really appreciate the support. We've gotten great support. I know it means so much for our staff. It can be an exhausting task when you've just cleared the snow for the 10th time and you're on your 8th 12-hour shift. It really starts to wear the guys down, and the thank yous that they get from the community, from the council, and from administration, it just goes a long way. They know that they do feel supported, and they really appreciate the support they've received.
I want to let you know, I was at the radio station the other night, and because I'm a DJ, and they had the public service announcement, but it had the public service announcement that talked about all the snow removal. Mm-hmm. And so it was great to be able to read that on the air to educate people about the process, how long it takes, because I don't think people realize how long it takes to do the whole community. Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Good.
And yeah, that outreach really helps.
That
helps
as the
community
ton.
Gets educated on what it is, it's helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Mayor?
Well, how can we be nothing but proud of the team that you guys have put together doing their streets? 2,100 snow miles, 900 grader miles, 3,000 miles, 26 inches of snow, twice what it normally is. You guys are doing a great job. And as a mayor, I'm very proud of the team and the effort and the collaboration working with the university. Grading their lawn a couple times, a good place for us to put 500 cubic feet. I mean, that's a big deal for us this winter. So good going, good kudos, and tell all the guys thanks. I tell them every time I get a chance, but I just want to pass it on.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One more for you.
One more.
In addition to thanking the staff who's keeping up on it and encouraging people who might be watching, just because the street in front of your house hadn't been plowed down to the bare pavement doesn't mean you're being neglected. It's just a matter of priorities. And completely unrelated to snow removal per se, has there been any info yet on the new rubberized seal coat that we put on the streets? How's that holding up?
That's a good
This was our test year for that. We put it down, and it was a heavy year, and we've gotten freeze-thaw temperatures. It's been graded with a lot of down pressure several times, and so far we're really happy with the way it's holding up. It's not shedding chip. It seems to be holding up well. We haven't seen cracking coming through. I actually was looking at that earlier today, and so we're cautiously optimistic that it's nice for a first year before we invest money in future treatments to have a really heavy winter, because it'll give us a good idea of if it's going to stand up to it.
Sweet. So far, so good. I like that.
Oh.
Good.
So since you reported here, will you also report at council again? Because you did last week, didn't you?
No.
No.
We gave a synopsis, but no, the idea was now in the middle of the snow event, it makes sense, and this was the quickest we could get.
Oh,
it.
okay. Thanks. Did you have something, John?
Just a question. I had a couple of people, and naturally, we got people that'll complain if they get hung by a new rope. And I had a couple of people complain about the fact that, they just go down the middle of the street. They don't. And I hope I was right, my explanation was that the people that are operating the equipment are given a route. And they also are working under time constraints to get the route cleaned. And so if they essentially go around every car, instead of being able to make one pass down the street, for example, the street in front of my house, which is Kenneth, cars on both sides. I mean, if it gets much closer, they won't, as you said, they won't be able to get through. And the reason that they don't do that is because instead of making one pass, they would have to make two or three. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think you said something very important there. There are a couple things within that. The first pass that the operators make, they go out in trucks, and the trucks don't have any sort of snow gate. Our first priority is to try and make the roads passable. Let's get it safe and get that first pass, and we can do that relatively quickly. Each truck has an area, and the trucks will go out, and they'll quickly hit that area to make one pass in each direction so that they can open it up and make it safe. The graders then go back out and make what we call a pushback pass. They have a snow gate that they operate, which is actually a unique thing to the Northwest. It's something that most other places in the country don't use snow gates. They just plow in tandem, and people dig themselves out. You plug the driveways, you plug the mailboxes, and it's, all right, dig away, and that's just what people do. I was actually really surprised when I was introduced to a snow gate when I moved here. I'd never seen one. So then the graders will go and they'll operate the snow gates. That's a far longer process. And when there are parked cars on the road, a grader is a far bigger piece of equipment. It's the only one that can get in and do it. And so if the cars are parked too close, it may seem like there's some gap between the cars, but you got a big piece of equipment, and we don't want to be hitting cars. That's not something that we want to be doing. So if they have enough room, they will dive in and try and push that back. But if there's a lot of parked cars on the street, they're pretty limited with what they can do, and so they'll just continue along that line and make sure that they try and not push the cars in. One of the pieces of equipment that we were able to get this past year that has helped us with that is this grader. This is the first time we've ever had a grader with this plow and a grate on it. And the grader's a little more agile, so it can pop into some of the places that a loader. The loader. It can pop into some of the places that the grader can't. And so this loader is the first one that we've equipped this way. And so that's been a helpful tool, both downtown with its increased agility and in those areas. But that's the main reason there's the gap is if there aren't cars and they're only seeing the two pushes in the middle, it's because the graders haven't made it yet. And it can take them, between 12 and 36 hours after the trucks have gone by to finish their route. And so, but if there's a lot of cars, it's because they probably didn't have enough room to get in between.
Any way you look at it, what we're doing now, what you guys are doing now, and the fellows that actually operate the equipment is so much better than it has been in the past, and the response time is so much quicker, and the amount of berms that they do leave are so much smaller, especially in the residential areas. It is, as Bill has said, as everyone has said, kudos. You folks are doing an absolutely great job on controlling it. To this point, twice as much snow as we generally get, and I don't think it's done snowing. So we're going to get another shot or two of it.
Yeah, another big shot tomorrow probably.
Yeah.
So.
Great.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Thanks, Tyler.
If there's nothing else, then I'll have a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Can you agree? We should
Oh,
adjourn.
yeah.
We're adjourned.
Do you want to hang around some more?